Ed and Lorraine Warren are two of the most well-known people within the paranormal field, with many looking up to them with respect and admiration for being pioneers in paranormal research. Others, however, including myself, believe them to be nothing more than con artists, or at the very least extremely delusional.
Now, I do have some fairly strong views on the Warrens, however I don't want to scrutinise them unnecessarily, so during this video I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can and work with the information that's available to us to try and paint the most accurate picture of them I can.
Ed Warren was born on the 7th of September 1926 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. 4 months later, on the 21st of January, his future wife Lorraine Warren was also born in Connecticut. During his early years, Ed claimed to have grown up in a haunted house, involving activities such as doors mysteriously opening by themselves, as well as seeing strange glowing balls of light.
It was in his youth, whilst working at the Colonial Theatre, that Ed first met Lorraine, who attended regularly with her mother. The couple began talking, and whilst on leave from the US Navy in 1945, they eventually married. After the war, Ed attended art school, however he eventually gave up, and with the remaining money he had, he bought a car, and himself and Lorraine travelled around the country selling his artwork, and it was then that their interest in the paranormal was sparked.
Ed began painting reportedly haunted sites in an attempt to gain access to some of the locations, and it seemed to work. They gained access to all kinds of haunted and historical buildings, and were able to talk with people who had experienced similar things to what Ed had growing up in a haunted house.
In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychical Research, an organisation set up to try and explore paranormal phenomena. During these investigations, Ed studied demonology and eventually took on the role of demonologist, saying that his methods were both scientific and rational. Lorraine, on the other hand, discovered that she in fact had psychic powers and was able to see and communicate with spirits, complementing Ed's more grounded approach to the paranormal. It was during this time that the society was joined by all kinds of different people from various backgrounds, from doctors to scientists to police officers and college students, all assisting the group in their investigations into psychic phenomena. Over time, the Warrens ended up investigating some fairly high-profile cases, all of which are displayed on their website www.warrens.net, and it's these cases that I'll be examining during this video.
One of the earliest and most famous cases the Warrens investigated was the haunted Annabelle doll. To see an in-depth background look on the case, you can have a look at our Haunted Dolls video we did a few years ago. In 1970, the doll was purchased as a gift from a mother to her daughter Donna. At first, nothing seemed unusual about the doll until Donna and her roommate both noticed it started to move around the apartment on its own and turned up in places where no one had either been or put it. Old parchment paper then started showing up with threatening messages written on it, despite neither of them owning old parchment paper. The girls contacted a medium who said that the spirit of a little girl had attached itself to the doll and stayed around Donna and her roommate as she felt safe around them. After this visit, things began turning more sinister. A friend of the girls began having nightmares about Annabelle the doll strangling him in his sleep, and bloodstains started appearing on the doll's hands. It was then that they called in a priest who in turn put them in contact with Ed and Lorraine Warren.
The Warrens said that the doll was in fact possessed by a demon and not by the spirit of a little girl as the medium had first suggested. They actually seized the doll, and upon driving home they had numerous problems with their car that they attributed to the evil force attached to Annabelle. Over the coming weeks they would experience similar things to what Donna and her housemates had, and said that the doll had an overwhelming sense of evil around it. They even tried to exorcise the doll, but to no avail. It was then that they decided to lock it in a specially made cabinet where it resides to this very day. This is undoubtedly one of the most well-known cases that the Warrens investigated, however I can't exactly see why. I have no doubt that there may have in fact been someone called Donna who had a minor haunting in her apartment, and maybe it was in fact attached to the doll somehow, but as for it being evil and demonic, there doesn't seem to be any proof of this whatsoever other than the word of mouth and the story that's been spoken about by the Warrens themselves. However, despite the lack of proof, a story like this does gather a lot of attention and a lot of money as well.
The next high-profile case the Warrens investigated was the Amityville murder house. In November of 1974, in the small town of Amityville, New York, a young man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. killed 6 of his family members by gunshots to the head before being convicted of the crime and handed 6 life sentences.
13 months after the murders, the Lutz family moved into the DeFeo home and began experiencing strange events. All members of the family said that their personalities began to change, and not for the better. They also said that their mental and physical health began to deteriorate rapidly. One of the more disturbing aspects was that their young daughter started playing with an imaginary friend, which she described as looking like a red-eyed pig, sometimes as small as a dog, however sometimes it could grow as large as a house. Foul odours were also said to emanate from various parts of the home.
On the night of March the 6th, 1976, Ed and Lorraine Warren were invited to investigate the house alongside a news crew from News 5. During the investigation, Ed claimed that he was attacked by a demonic force, and both claimed that a photo of one of the murdered DeFeo children was captured. However, this was later proven by skeptics to be Paul Bartz, who was present on the night of investigation. In 1977, a book entitled The Amityville Horror was published and was based upon the events experienced by the Lutz family. Since then, however, many events in the book have been disproven as extensions of the truth or complete fabrications. For example, there's a section regarding cloven hoof prints that were found in the snow surrounding the house. However, weather records show that there was in fact no snow in New York at that particular time. The problem here is that many aspects of the book have been taken as fact, when really that's far from it. The Warrens' investigation was also scrutinised, not only for the previously mentioned ghost photo, but also the fact they claim the house was built on land but used by the Chinook Indians to abandon the sick, old and mentally ill, things that there is no solid proof of whatsoever.
Two more cases that the Warrens investigated that I actually know quite a bit about were in the UK, being the Enfield haunting and the Borle Rectory in Borle Churchyard. Now, the Enfield haunting was a huge case at the time and today remains one of the most well documented cases of paranormal phenomena. Now, we have done a video on it, which I'll link in the description if you would like to go and have a little bit of a more in-depth look at the Enfield haunting. But just to sum it up really, it involved a family in 1977 that began experiencing strange things, and the activities seemed to centre around one of the daughters who, today we're probably looking at it as psychokinesis, being able to move objects with your mind. However, there were events there that suggest it could possibly have been one of the former residents of the house who passed away. Either way, many strange events happened at the home, and it was investigated by all sorts of people. The police were actually involved and witnessed things moving around the house. So yeah, it's extremely well documented, and it's a very fascinating case to look deeper into.
Ed and Lorraine visited the home in the summer of 1978 and turned up uninvited, to the annoyance of many people involved in the case. There is some speculation as to whether they were allowed in the house at all due to the lack of reports, so it seems they either had nothing to do with the case whatsoever or actually refused entry. Either way, in their usual fashion, they claim that there was a demon haunting the house, despite no previous mention or evidence of this. Guy Lyon Playfair, who in my opinion was a very reliable source, claimed that Ed Warren had actually spoken to him, stating that he could make Mr. Playfair a lot of money from the case.
Now, Borle Rectory in Borle Churchyard is the final case that I'll be investigating from the Warrens, and it's actually one that I know quite a bit about. It's probably about a half-hour drive from where I actually live, and I've investigated the place plenty of times. Now again, this is a very in-depth case. It's one that I can't cover in a matter of minutes, so just to sum it up, there was a rectory in Borle that supposedly was given the title the most haunted house in England. Now there's much debate as to whether it is ever haunted at all, or whether things were greatly exaggerated there, but either way it's gathered a lot of attention over the years. The first reports of a haunting there actually came from the first family that moved into the rectory, the Borle family. Now Henry Borle, who was the rector at the church at the time, he had 4 daughters I believe, and all 4 of these daughters said that they saw a ghostly nun walking around the grounds while they were sitting out in the summer house. Now there's actually been no proof whatsoever of there ever being a monastery in Borle. The closest one I believe was over in Sudbury, which is a fair distance away. However, it hasn't stopped a lot of legends and stories about ghostly nuns and monks lurking around the church and the old site of the rectory. Now the rectory itself actually burned down in 1937 and was demolished a few years after that, so there's no trace whatsoever of it today. However, the churchyard as well is said to be quite haunted, and I've investigated the churchyard many times, and I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the most haunted place I've investigated, far from it. I think there is stuff going on in the churchyard, but it's very subtle. Sometimes you go there, more times often than not, there'll be nothing whatsoever that happens in the churchyard. However, there has been occasions where there has been quite prominent activity.
Again, the Warrens said that there was an overwhelming sense of evil in the churchyard and claimed to have captured photographic evidence of the ghostly monk and nun, both of which it turns out never existed and was more than likely concocted by the Borle children.
Now the problem I've got with making this video really is that there's a lot of people who look up to the Warrens, and they are, like I said at the start of the video, a very big name in the paranormal field, and they're both deceased now, so they aren't able to defend themselves. However, I believe in shining truth on various aspects of the paranormal, and from everything I've examined, both of the Warrens seem to have been nothing more than con artists, nothing more than liars, and the thing is as well, upon a number of the cases I've mentioned here, they've also exploited a huge amount of people with their services, unnecessarily vulnerable people who have lost loved ones, people potentially with mental health issues, and the Warrens have had no hesitation in exploiting them. Which is why I think it's important that people are opened up to the truth about all of this, and that they're not the paranormal saints that people in the past have perceived them to be.